Yes, you're on TikTok Live.
Oh, hey! Okay, I actually do know how to do this.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
Why are we not recording this?
We are. But you're not in the picture.
Oh no. Okay, now wait.
Wait.
Oh no, I can't believe we're about to do this. It's fine. This is fun. So.
Okay.
You bend, and pop the hip.
Okay, wait.
So bend.
Wait. Okay, kind of come right here. Okay, here we go.
This is not
Okay,
good.
here we go.
So you like this, and pop your hip. And
This is
pop your
important
hip.
political discourse.
There we go.
Okay, that one might be.
All right. Thank you so much. Did you get my red shoes?
We should have.
They're for you.
Because they're right here.
Well, thank you. Okay, so tell me, how did you guys get all this going?
So harebrained idea that.
Am I to sit here?
Yes, that is a hot seat. That is a hot seat. Harebrained idea that everyone I talk to, no matter if it's guns, abortion, whatever, right, we may have never met each other before. And yet, within about 10 to 15 minutes, we're all going, well, I could totally get on board with that, or this, or that. They could be Republicans, they could be Democrats, they could be independent. And I was sick of for all of us have nowhere to go and no way to let candidates know that we exist, so that we stop hearing all this really crazy extreme stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's so many more of us in the middle.
Yes, there are. I mean, it is, so I'm aggressively moderate. And that's where I've always been, that's where I'm gonna stay, but you have to work at it, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to get drawn to one extreme or the other because often the people on the outside edge are super loud. Mm-hmm. But they're passionate, and it's also been so helpful to build consensus by bringing people in at the same time together, and they all of a sudden start to recognize the commonality and understanding. Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead. Usually what I'll have people do is they just kind of give like a 2-minute, it can be like a stump speech, elevator speech, anything you want it to be, and then we'll start with questions. If we get through all our questions, we can have some free time to ask questions, but we do have quite a few.
Okay.
So go ahead.
All right, Joy Hofmeister, State Superintendent, running for governor as a Democrat, but really as an Oklahoman. I'm running as a mom of 4 kids. My husband and I have been married 37 years, and we have our first grandbaby 5 months ago. And there was a point where I said, this is just how it is in Oklahoma. And then that just kind of haunted me. And I began to find that real, strong, deep resolve that we have to fight. We have to fight for strong public education and safe and healthy communities, the infrastructure to have broadband, those relationships with our sovereign tribal nations, for example, good paying jobs where people can reach into the middle class with home ownership. And all of that is what it's going to take to build a robust economy, and you can't have one without the others. And so, after seeing Governor Stitt hijack the Republican Party and also pander to extremism and really drive this state into the ground, I am stepping forward to say, Oklahoma belongs to you, and you belong, period. And we want to stand up for the future I know our kids need and deserve, but I think Oklahoma's at a tipping point right now. This election is going to be a tipping point for our state, and we can't not fight for all of those who need to have so much more. And we all love Oklahoma, and that's why I'm here.
We have some questions for you.
Sure.
I have a pretty big platform. They're mostly
more left-leaning.
Sure.
And a lot of them are concerned about you switching parties.
Yeah.
That's like their main question is, why should progressives believe that you are a Democrat?
Yeah, well, I'm a Democrat because it's a big tent. And the Republican Party is one that has narrowed over time.
Right.
I think a lot of us are influenced by even our family. My whole family are Republicans. Maybe some of my kids aren't, but my family is. And I was raised that way. You know, I was the person who was proud to vote in my first election. I remember voting for Ronald Reagan. And that is not the same party we have today.
No.
And as we look at what it takes to actually advance and progress and get things done, we have to get back to a place where we value common sense, respect for one another, working together, courage, and that is something that I saw that was lacking, and bottom line, wasn't going to change under Kevin Stitt anyway. I do not belong there. And my invitation is, meet me in the middle, and let's get something done.
Right. Okay, that's great. So this is a big one. How are you planning on getting anything done with a Republican supermajority? Are there certain policies that you will focus on?
So, you know, politics is all about relationships. And I have learned that over 7.5 years. I had never run in an election when I stepped out to run the first time, at a time where I observed someone, Janet Marusi, if some of you might remember that name, who I felt was really very similar to now, running our public education into the ground, demoralizing teachers, and really not being willing to support public education. And just like Governor Stitt, who is pushing a voucher scheme, that is going to kill rural Oklahoma, and it's going to harm every single child in Oklahoma public schools. So I stood up to her and stepped in to do this, and I am using that same sense of we've got to fight. We figure it out as we go, because it's too important to carefully plan something for the future. It's like, now is the time, and we're going to be scrappy, and we're going to do a campaign that is going to be one that is going to have to bring people from many sides, many views, and from Democrats, independents, and there will need to be moderate Republicans who come over to win. But we have to find a way to do that together.
A hot topic in this group has been abortions.
Mm-hmm.
How you plan on making them safe and available to those who need them, and what exceptions. Are you going to be able to undo any of what has been done?
Well, we have to find a way to undo what Kevin Stitt has done. He has made international headlines, and that's what he's been seeking. He's reading off a national agenda for his own ambition. Somehow, he does not care about you.
No.
He has assaulted women and doctors, and he is, yes, so there's got to be a balance. Let's find where we are not intruding on the rights of women, where we're not criminalizing physicians and healthcare. So I am a Southern Baptist girl. I always grew up and identified as pro-life. But I haven't walked in everyone's shoes. I said this in October when I stepped into the race. I do not favor extremes on either side of this. At the end of the day, the bottom line is this is a healthcare decision, and it's between a woman and her doctor, and it needs to stay that way, period.
That's good. A lot of people hear pro-life, though, out of your mouth, and it really makes them like, whoa.
So I would say, come to the table, and we have to talk about the conversation of what that means after we no longer have a constitutional backstop.
Right.
There are going to be a whole lot of people who have always identified in this way, knowing that there is still choices for their neighbors.
Well, and there's a whole bunch of pro-life people that would never force their beliefs on anyone else or restrict their access.
Exactly.
I promise you.
This is a conversation that we would not have. We would all be in our own little actually think that there's a lot of people in the middle, and when they hear about the extremes of what Governor Stitt has done by having no exception for rape or incest, just for starters, and then the miscarriage bounty hunter incentive at $10,000, pitting neighbor against neighbor, incentivizing citizens to sue anyone who helps a woman in need, aids and abets, and then to assault physicians with a $100,000 fine and with up to 10 years in prison. That is going to absolutely harm Oklahoma women and their health care. And so we have to have these conversations. And it is that conversation that I began reaching out immediately. It shook me to the core. And I began calling people that I knew were very strong in their religious beliefs around this. And I asked them, now what do you think? Let's have a talk about this. And the kinds of things we've heard back is those who have said, I've never had to think about this before. It's always just been, this is what I think. And I think that there's like actually something really powerful that is coming out of this that is about women and agency and thinking about what this actually means and what the danger that this extreme position introduces in a way that no state has experienced. When this trigger happens, I think that this needs to be a time where women are heard and those who love the women in their lives.
Right. So guns is another big subject.
Yes.
What can you support to encourage safe gun ownership? What do you think you can get done?
We have to do something. You know, I'm a gun owner. I certainly, have always believed that we can have responsible gun ownership. I was raised with that. And the Second Amendment is a constitutional right. However, we can have, and I'm convinced we can have, responsible gun ownership and a path for increased safety for students and for communities. So let's talk about where we can really get something accomplished. I think there's 3 areas where most Americans, and I think the majority of Oklahomans can agree, and that is 1, raise the age limit for at least, to be 21 for a gun purchase, and to have background checks for all gun sales, and a 3-day waiting period after a sale to complete background check. The FBI supports that. We also know that can prevent a impulsive, violent act with a firearm, even for someone who is contemplating suicide.
That's great. A question from someone viewing who didn't want to put it up on the thing. Do you support the LGBTQ plus community?
100%. Remember when I said Oklahoma belongs to you and you belong? What are those Oklahoma values we hold dear that we try to teach our kids? I did at least, and my husband. It was to respect one another. And that is key. The hate, the harm,
Stitt has done
is
a lot.
incongruent in a state that talks about following the steps of Christ.
It's going to be hard to reverse what Stitt's done now, some of his.
And that's why this is imperative. We are at a tipping point, as I said. Absolutely at a tipping point.
What is your plan to repair the Oklahoma OHCA?
It's Oklahoma Hospital.
And Medicaid in Oklahoma, the OHCA has never complied with 56 OS section 1011.98.
We talk about that every day.
Which would save Oklahoma $250 million a year in Medicaid spending. This was not our question.
Okay, I think this might be something, I'm not exactly sure if I'm answering the question, but Governor Stitt wants to privatize Medicaid.
Right.
And we know that the people spoke. I voted for Medicaid expansion. My gosh, that's a no-brainer. We are not, we should not have a governor who is going against the will of the people in this regard by attempting to have managed care, which is going to remove 15% outside our state to, you know, some private sector that is going to make money at the expense of the needed health and treatment of, and frankly, our kids are one of the largest groups that are needing the benefits through Medicaid expansion as well. And so I stand absolutely against that. And with those doctors, now I know that the Hospital Association, I think, did try to negotiate some kind of path forward, seeing,
They wrote the bill.
yeah, we had some conversations about that, as there was like a need to know that something's happening, you need to have at least your voice in there. But there are times when I think that's a mistake. I'm not saying that's a mistake in this, I don't know enough about weighing in on their language, but there are times like vouchers, no, we are not negotiating. Yeah.
I mean, that 15% is going to come off the provider reimbursement, and then there's a point where, and I'm a pediatrician, so kids never make money, so they're always the group that's marginalized first, and literally,
And they don't, right.
And for pediatricians, I mean, there reaches a point because half of our state's kids are on Medicaid, and it's growing every year, that literally you can't employ your staff and keep your clinic open with the reimbursement. It's not about doctors getting rich, trust me. And pediatricians are the lowest paid group of any doctors.
Well, and it's they're paid on
but they can't keep that
procedures.
shingle open, and so we
And
lose
not
all the
well-care.
Yeah, we lose the providers who
Yeah.
need to service this new group of covered, Medicaid recipients, and so that's where we're at right now.
Thank you for giving that perspective.
Well, and I have 2 children with developmental disabilities. It affects even us because this you can't find providers who are willing to take on any more patients.
Yes.
Who have that to help meet their financial needs.
I can't imagine just that feeling of knowing that there are great needs and then that question of where does that help come from. So there are thousands of people, right? Just experiencing that as well. I mean, this Oklahoma needs a governor who cares. I mean, this has to be about people, not party or power. It has to be about people and making strong families, and that makes strong schools, and strong schools make strong communities. I mean, like if we get this out of balance, everything goes off the rails, and it's very hard to get it all back. But it's like I think of it like an ecosystem that has to be very balanced and cared for, and the consequences of ignorance or hubris are paid by our kids ultimately, and those who are most vulnerable.
Everybody wants to know your view on the death penalty, which I pretty much know your view, but they also want to know about your thoughts on the Julius Jones case.
Yeah. So, we have put out a statement back, was it in when was it that we started that?
It was, I think, a couple days before his execution date. So November?
Yeah, I know we asked for a suspension of the death penalty.
Oh, then that was even.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Because there was also that botched execution.
Right,
And I think most of us remember when we had another. Governor Fallon put a halt. So yes, this death penalty is a part of our Constitution now, and it was voted by the vote of the people. But I think that the death penalty is one that is part of a system. My husband's is a judge, and these are all humans that are part of a process that's not perfect. There should always be room for evidence, for justice. So to answer that, around Julius Jones, for example, we were very clear that we believe the governor got it half right. Of course, grateful that his life was spared, but he should be eligible for parole. And I I think his executive order is bullshit.
You can say that on TikTok.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of people are gonna really like that answer because I guess they didn't see that clip that you did or whatever.
Well, that happens. Sometimes that's why we have to be out there with everyone. I mean, you one at a time, or talking in ways to elevate that. So I appreciate the question. Absolutely.
So the tribes is another big thing, and you mentioned them earlier. We need to make sure they can retain their sovereignty while making sure that the criminals,
Mm-hmm.
and the tribes say they want to work
Oh yeah, of course.
with the governor. How do you see that going?
Well, it's going nowhere but south if
Yeah.
the governor continues. And I am proud to have really strong relationships with our tribal nations, our sovereign tribal nations in Oklahoma. And we'll continue, and I'm grateful for the support and their financial support, their relationships that we've developed through tribal consultation that we have really championed as some new federal law had to occur. But when it comes to McGirt, hey, Leslie, one of my favorite people. When it comes to McGirt, though, that's a problem that could have been solved and turned into an opportunity. I was meeting with one of the tribal leaders, a group of leaders in one of our tribal nations here. That this week, was it just yesterday? Actually was, yes. And let's see, and this one. Oh God, don't do that. See, if you're on TikTok, you're missing everything. Because it's really great time, and don't you wish you were here? Okay, so bottom line, someone actually said, I think it is an opportunity as well. This could have been solved immediately. Get together, work out a compact with each tribe that's affected, and we have compacts on a number of things. We have the ability to have cross-jurisdiction, just like we do with the federal government when it comes to a crime scene or jurisdiction and boundaries. That is nothing new. I spent an entire day, hours, probably 8 hours, in Durant, with the Choctaw Nation, with their prosecutors, their police force, various, their courthouse. We spent quite a bit of time just talking about this very issue, and the tribes were gearing up and were aware of what was about to happen. It was the governor who never came to the table and instead decided he wanted to make this an issue to politicize, create, and stoke fear. That is his MO. He sows chaos and division, and with Governor Stitt, there is always a loser. And he is never able to work in partnerships. We have seen this over and over and over. So that is one that can be solved right away. And we can't wait to get to work.
That's great to hear. Anybody have questions? Because my list is done.
I was gonna say, I think we have one right.
Question on the chat. Mary Fallon signed Senate Bill 1140, which allows faith-based adoption agencies to prevent same-sex couples from adopting children in foster care due to the agency's religious beliefs. Would you undo this law and abide by the Establishment Clause to keep church and state separate?
I do believe church and state should be separate. And to answer that, obviously, if that bill had come to me, I would not sign that. Our children need loving homes, period. And the other is, I do think it's important to know that, I do have a background where my husband and I let me just tell you just a little bit about myself. I was that kid who struggled to read, had dyslexia, it runs in my family. My dad was an electrician, my grandpa was an electrician. It was the trades that launched us into the middle class. My grandfather was first generation American. And then reading was something that was really struggle. It was teachers who helped, but overcoming that is something that took much longer than it needed to into adulthood. I dropped out of college, was the first in my family to go. No one ever, on cousins, nobody, had ever gone. and I did not really know how to navigate that. I dropped out, I got married, I put my husband through Baptist Seminary at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. He was focused on separation of church-state issues and church ethics, and was then led into a different path, which was law school, and then has been a judge working in a criminal court, in a criminal division for the city of Tulsa for the last 20 years. So he can't be with me at these kinds of events, but or anything related to the campaign, but very supportive of this. So I have very strong feelings about, our faith is personal, and it is something that we should see in action, not wearing it on our sleeves for a benefit politically. And we also, in these kinds of things that we're talking about, the great need for children to have loving homes, I definitely believe that we need to ensure that we just have great parents that are there to take those in that are needing that love. And so I hope that helps answer that, but I did want you to have a little bit of background since that tied in with some of that.
What would you do to address the teacher shortage?
Oh. Gosh, so this has really been our focus, my focus, since I stepped into office in 2015, and it's still not solved. It's gotten worse. There have been gains, and we actually have seen some improvement, but it's going to take a bold investment in education to actually solve the teacher shortage. We could solve it in 3 months if we actually paid teachers a wage that was really competitive. And if we had a governor who could get just as enthusiastic about teachers and the impact they have in preparing our children and giving them the promise that they deserve, but also building a workforce that's ready and prepared for jobs we haven't even thought of or imagined, but that are ready. If they cared about that like he cares about $700 million for a Panasonic deal, and I'm not against, something that is an economic, incentive that makes sense and works, but there are some things that, are going to take the kind of leadership from a governor that is tenacious about solving that. If we do not solve it, that is our upstream problem. Yeah. And when we hear business executives, and I do sit around a boardroom table and hear them say, we don't have the engineers, we don't have the culture that people are attracted to from out of state to come here because they read headlines that are sometimes embarrassing. And frankly, I will be a governor who is a backstop to crazy. And we can change this and bring balance.
Sorry.
All right. Anything else? No. Okay. Thank you so much.
Joy, you're behind
I mean,
me. I didn't see you.
So I've heard a lot of people talk about like bringing internet infrastructure out to like rural Oklahoma, but like not a lot of like plans on how you or anyone will do it.
Yeah.
So do you have anything more specific?
It can be done. There's kind of a whole host of factors, from the last mile to the broadband reach. So during the pandemic, we could really see where those weaknesses were, and the State Department of Education immediately put out 50,000 hotspots that we mailed out, and some of them didn't have the cell coverage to even be able to use, right? And so it really revealed inequity across the state. But telemedicine isn't going to happen. When I talk about safe and healthy communities, I am also talking about access to affordable quality health care, which includes mental health and addiction treatment and support. So much of those deserts of care can be overcome, particularly with some of the licensed professional counselors in that kind of work through remote or telemedicine. And we know it's also a way for adults to be able to also retool and maybe earn an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or finish another piece of their education that's missing. We could also attract so many people here. I got my son-in-law to come to Oklahoma, and he was working his Manhattan job in economics. Sorry for that. And he was able to remote work that whole time. Imagine the beautiful places in Oklahoma that could rebound and thrive and grow if, with the lower cost of living, get this inflation under control, and we have the internet connectivity. And it needs to be as common as running water and electricity, and we still have kids that don't have that. So how you do it, I'll have a roadmap with specifics, but I do know there are a lot of planning meetings that we were a part of, exposing where those needs were and how to do it, and I do know some of the dollar figures, and we're into some hefty double digits in the millions, but it can be done. It can be done if you wanted it done. All right. Okay, I think you're not
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm asking for everybody's vote, but most importantly, I want to earn it through building trust, and that is a part of, for me, listening. And so I hope, I know today is a time where you've got a schedule, but I hope in the future there'll be a chance for me to hear from you. What issues are important to you and your family, and I hope to earn your support.
The TikTok viewers are saying minimum wage is like,
Oh,
there's
I'm so glad you asked
a
that.
lot of people saying that.
Yeah, so that is so important. That, first of all, one of the easy things that could be done with that is to remove the limit, where right now municipalities cannot choose to raise the minimum wage, and that's one solution that we've seen go forward. And I bet your next guest has a whole bunch of things to say about that, Miss Leslie Osborne. But yes, that is an important piece, and there should be that kind of freedom. As a small business owner for 15 years, I know how important it is to pay top talent, but the marijuana industry is a big factor right now in paying high wages, and then we have a lot of openings, and yet too many people still can't afford. Home ownership is out of reach, so
Sounds great.
take care of each other.
Yeah.
It's important. All right,
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
I'm just so thankful for you.
Sweet. Wow. Well, I really enjoyed it, and next time we'll bring some wine. And yeah, I would love that. Okay.
You have to get one of my shady fit shirt.
I noticed it.
All right. We'll be back in a moment with Leslie Osborne.
Okay.
Derek.